everybody? What's happening, everybody? My name is Kevin Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Loud Majority Live here Monday, May 12th, 2025. Giddy up, let's go, guys. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today. We are going to be joined by the CEO of Old Glory Bank, Mike Ring. We're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve, what it actually does, and how it has hurt Americans since its inception. Always great to be joined by Mike. Love to hear about the banking and financial stuff that a lot of us talk about, but many of us don't seem to know too much about. Also, could we be getting Governor Stefanik? Could we be getting Governor Stefanik as we are beginning to see new polling coming out of the state of New York? Obviously, Congresswoman Stefanik spoke about this on Sunday night on Mark Levin's show. We're going to show you guys that real big stuff. Liberal leaders all over the world are starting to come around the mountain on immigration. It turns out nationalism will continue to win because no matter where you live in the world, people like their country. They don't like their country being invaded by hordes of random people. So guys, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. We are rocking. We are rolling. Let's pop this live chat up onto the screen. I want to make sure I say hello. Thank you to Jeremy for covering for me on Friday. I was at a wedding in Washington, D.C., two of my favorite people in the whole wide world. Monica Page and Dan Baldwin got married. So congratulations to them. As a matter of fact, you know what? Here we go. Here's me with the bride and the groom, two of my favorite people in the whole wide world. So I want to thank them for inviting me. It was very nice. It was very nice to be down there. I got to see some old friends, got to catch up with some of the boys. Let me show you. Let's see, me, Mike Crispy, Paul Ingracia, looking good as ever. Here that is, boom, looking good, hanging out with the boys. Also, I got to run into an old friend. Down there. Here was Lee, the Savage Zeldin, and me. That was great. It was so good to see Lee, as always. So I want to thank Jeremy for filling in for me on Friday. Absolutely a great time. So let's dive on into the news. Obviously, for those of you watching, this is a New York-based show. As you see it down in the title right there, live from New York, right there. So when I hear governor talk, baby, I'm jazzed up. I'm jacked up. I'm ready to go. You guys know that this show is activism first, commentary second, and we are all geared up for 2026. Sure, we've got races going on all over the country in 2025, and we'll be working on those for sure, most notably the New Jersey governor race, because the goal is to keep the momentum going that we got in Pennsylvania. The momentum is to keep the goal is to keep the momentum going. Win in New Jersey, take it right into New York in 2026. And we're beginning to get a clearer picture of exactly all of what that means as New York continues to shift rightward. As Governor Hochul's polls drop below President Trump in the deep blue state of New York. This from the Post-Millennial. The state of New York is showing signs of a political shift to the right, with new polling indicating a growing dissatisfaction with Democratic leadership and increasing support for Republicans. A Gray House poll conducted between April 22nd and April 28th found that just 36% of New Yorkers approve of Kathy Hochul's job performance, while 55% disapprove. In contrast, President Trump holds a higher approval rating in the state at 43%. President Trump is actually outpolling Kathy Hochul in New York. What does that mean? That means that when you, as an elected official, promote the America First agenda, as opposed to the neocon ideas of the past, the people support it. I've only been trying to instill this in you people for 5 years. Shouldn't be complicated. The poll found Trump's notable performance in the 2024 election, where he increased his vote share in New York by 6 percentage points compared to 2020, receiving 43.7% of the vote. New York, of course, is plagued by political issues, including rising crime, immigration concerns, political corruption, all of which have contributed to growing voter discontent. Republicans are gaining traction after decades of Democratic control, with signs of increasing competitiveness statewide. In 2022, Lee Zeldin came within 6 points of defeating Governor Hochul. The rightward shift in New York, in particular in New York City, has happened since 2006, said Landon Wall, the poller from Gray House, according to the Daily Mail. Wall highlighted Trump's gains within New York City could prop up a future Republican candidate. He also noted that Republican gains in the state stem not just from Trump's popularity, but from the dissatisfaction of the one-party Democratic rule. This is what I try to instill in people. This is what I try to tell them, guys. It does not matter where you live. You can have an impact, particularly on global politics, particularly on nationwide politics. What do I mean by that? Sure, Lee Zeldin came up short in 2022, but with the likes of people like George Santos and Anthony D'Esposito, Mark Molinaro, and Brandon Williams, we were able to secure the House majority, stopping Democratic control in the House of Representatives. Now, obviously, they didn't do everything. They didn't do everything we wanted them to do, but having Republicans in control of the House is certainly better than having Democrats. And we were able to secure that not only in the state of New York, but in other blue states like California. It doesn't matter where you live, guys. You can have an impact on your local area. And your local area can have an impact on national politics. Back to the article. The poll also finds that 60% of voters believe it's time for someone new, which includes 5% of independents and 34% of Democrats in a potential matchup. Republican Representative Lee Stefanik trails Hochul by just 6 points, with 46% supporting Hochul and 40% supporting Stefanik, while 14% continue to remain undecided, well within the margin of error. Well within the margin of error. Lee Zeldin did not start out at 6 points. If Elise Stefanik is starting in single digits against Governor Hochul, could we see a major shift in the state of New York moving into 2026? For all my New Yorkers out there, you know I'm up for the fight. My question is, are you guys? Of course, Stefanik is the top GOP contender, blowing people like Mike Waller and Bruce Blakeman. I love Bruce Blakeman. This isn't a dig at him. But when it comes to those gubernatorial primary polls, she is blowing them out of the water. Up some 55% to their single digits, with about 30% remaining undecided. But more importantly, what Elise Stefanik does, if she decides to run for governor, is she clears the field. No one else will jump in. Therefore, we basically don't have a primary, and we can focus on the general election. We had a heated primary in 2022 here in New York. Lee Zeldin obviously came out big on that one, but a lot of money had to be spent. A lot of time had to be spent. A lot of Republicans bloodying each other up in that primary. Didn't like that. A lot of friendships of mine I had were damaged forever. Primaries are nasty, and if you live in the state of New Jersey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Primaries get bloody. While I think primaries can sometimes be healthy, I also think sometimes they can be incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Elise Stefanik was asked about this. Joe Delio, it's not your show. Elise Stefanik was asked about this on Mark Levin. Here is what she said.
What are your thoughts about that? Can you convey anything to us right now?
Well, thank you for the question, Mark. I am strongly considering running for governor of New York State. I'm born and bred New Yorker. I'm proud to be the highest-ranking New York Republican who has really led the charge in holding New York elected Democrats accountable for their failures. Whether it's the economic crisis in New York, the highest tax state in the nation, the most unfriendly to small businesses, you're seeing a mass exodus of people who have been run out of the state because of Kathy Hochul's failed policies. On top of that, you're seeing a criminals first first, an illegals first agenda fueled by Kathy Hochul, whether it's our failed bail reform or whether it's sanctuary cities. We need a governor that supports law enforcement, that supports rule of law, and frankly, common sense. And then, of course, you see a corruption crisis in New York State, whether it's New York Democrat governor after governor or Tish James, and she is rightfully being prosecuted by the Department of Justice for her alleged mortgage fraud. So it is ripe for new leadership in New York. I'm overwhelmed by the positive support, but we're taking a strong look at it. More to come.
Wow, if you decide to run the Republican Party, the Conservative Party, they should all get behind you. There should be no challenges. All the money should funnel in because I think you can win that. She's a disaster and you're a star. I think it'll be so fantastic for the state of New York.
Now I want to be clear. At least Congresswoman Stefanik has not made an official announcement yet. However, I gotta say, that sounds like something someone would say if they, in their mind, had already made a decision. Just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, you know. That sounds the way somebody would speak if they knew exactly what they were going to do. I'm just saying. And I'm excited about it. I'm genuinely excited about it. Is Congresswoman Stefanik perfect? No politician is. But I think she gives us the absolute best chance to defeat Governor Hochul in this upcoming election. Shocking the world. Because I want to be clear. While I just named 4 districts in New York that would potentially flip the House, if Congresswoman Stefanik were able to win, there would be more. And what would follow in the midterms? I'm talking about places in Massachusetts, places in New Jersey, real House races, giving President Trump the House majority that he's going to need, not only to avoid the nonsense impeachments that will eventually come if Democrats retain control of the House, but the momentum needed to move into 2028. And I'm excited about it. Guys, we'll be back in 1 second. Before we get to the rest of the stories, Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 6-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Guys, head on over to MyPillow.com and use promo code LOUD. That's MyPillow.com, promo code LOUD, for up to 80% off everything on the website in their big mega sale, baby. That's MyPillow.com, promo code LOUD. So, obviously, the big questions, the big issues that impact New York, but the rest of the nation and most of the world is immigration. That is the number one thing. It is the economy and it is immigration. Because nationalism is taking over the majority of the West as they continue to see not only their nations changing, but their cultures being deteriorated as well. So much so that not only are we beginning to see unifications in places like Ireland with pretty radical factions, if anyone knows the last 100 years of Irish history, but now we're seeing it in UK proper as well, with the Liberal Prime Minister Keir Starmer coming out against open borders, saying that the UK needs to get control of their borders. This is the topic. This is the populism message that will lead the right to victory, not electorally, morally. Nations have borders. Nations have cultures. Nations ought to take care of their own people first and not allow the importation of slave labor who deteriorate those cultures at the behest of radical globalists. Here's Liberal Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Let me put it this way. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, Often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities, the obligations we owe to each other. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people
I mean, to hear the leader of the radical left in England talking about British culture, guys, what we do, you know, it's so interesting because as globalism is continuing to be criticized around the world, messages of nationalism continue to be spread. You'd think that Keir Starmer doesn't understand the rise of nationalism in many of these other countries, and it's because of shows that are a lot bigger than mine, shows a lot bigger than this one. It's because of all of us. It's because of the X community. It's because of the online world that is telling people that it is okay to fly an American flag in America. It is okay to fly the Union Jack in the UK. It is okay to be proud of your country, and it is okay to want the best for your citizens. There is nothing wrong with detesting and standing against the importation of people who have no similarities to your culture. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not racist. It's not xenophobic. It's none of those things. Having pride in where you live, is the most patriotic thing a person can do. And I'm happy that the people of the UK are finally starting to wake up. Because as I say on this show, when Europe sneezes, America catches a cold. Whatever happens over there is going to happen over here very, very soon. Just the way things go. It's just the way things go. And we're beginning to see these sorts of the world beginning to understand that America is not going to be the doormat of the planet anymore. We're not going to just get walked over. We are not going to allow you to dump your cheap plastic crap into this country. We are not going to allow you to just dump your drugs here so that America can not only become addicted to your synthetic opioids, but addicted to your cheap plastic crap that breaks in 15 minutes so you can go back to Dollar General and buy even more. This comes on the heels of the U.S. really sticking it to the Chinese. From the post-millennial, U.S. and China officials say they've reached a preliminary agreement aimed at easing trade tensions between the two nations. While the specifics terms of the deal were not discussed, Scott Bessent described the talks as very productive and said information will be released on Monday. I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress between the United States and China in the very important trade talks, said Scott Bessent. The Swiss government was very kind to provide us this wonderful venue, and it led to a great deal of productivity. He goes on about that. The meeting was the first high-level conversation between the U.S. officials since both nations escalated their trade dispute. The United States recently raised tariffs on Chinese imports to 150%, prompting the Chinese to retaliate against it. And following these notions of trade talks, the Dow Jones is on fire right now, up nearly 2.5%. Up more than 1,000 points since the open today. It has leveled off a bit since a vast jump. But what's important? Why is this important? Well, if we go back to Liberation Day, the Dow is at 44,000, a little bit over 44,000. The Dow in the last 6 months is only down 3.5%. We have almost completely recuperated the losses we made after the tariffs were put into place. And we have not yet secured every trade deal we could make with Japan, with Vietnam, with Cambodia and Bangladesh. with India, with the rest of the European Union. We are almost at where we were. Because I think we all do this, I think. We are addicted to the 24-hour news cycle. But President Trump and the rest of the businessmen that he's put in place, they don't live in that world. They have plans. They execute part of the plan. And did the Dow Jones, did the S&P 500 suffer for just a little bit? It absolutely did. There's no questioning that. It absolutely did. But a little bit of short-term pain for long-term benefit is exactly what I think this country needs. The Chinese think in terms of decades. We think in terms of the next news cycle, the next day's headline on the New York Times. And I think that is to our detriment. But what I think is, and look, we still haven't gotten the budget bill, which is going to include no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. It's probably going to include the SALT tax deduction for everybody who lives here in the Northeast. Big deal. Very big deal. It's going to push more money into the economy. It's going to give you more of your money back. And by Donald Trump, I love this, by him not taxing tips. I mean, he not taxing tips, not taxing overtime. I don't want to say it, but he's pretty much doing away with the concept of the income tax, which is huge. It is going to put more expendable money in your pockets. And yes, you may pay more with the tariffs. You absolutely might. But it'll give you more power over your own dollar. Because for too long, the government has decided what they're going to do with your dollar and how they're going to tax it, how they're going to appropriate it. And it's because of places like the Federal Reserve, which we're going to talk about in 1 second with the CEO of Old Glory Bank. Before we get to that, guys, do me a favor and head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out our shop. We got so much good stuff over here. Let's see. Let's pop. Where is it? Bing, bing, bing. What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Boom! There it is. Guys, check out all the good stuff over at Loud Majority. We got new hot clothing coming in hot for everybody. This is the best way to support this show and everything we've got going on over here. There's going to be activism happening all over Long Island. All over Long Island. I'm going to make that announcement a little bit later on today if you'd like to get involved, if you are in the local area. But if you guys aren't and you'd still like to support the show, pick up a Trump Vance flag. Look at these bad boys over here. Got them discounted for you guys. Check those out today. Go to loudmajorityusa.com. That is loudmajorityusa.com. Guys, we'll be back in 1 second with all Federal Reserve talk with a proud sponsor of this show. He's a good friend of mine, and he's doing great things for the movement. It's the CEO of Old Glory Bank, Mike Ring. Alrighty, guys, we are back. Super excited to have, I believe this is a third time. He's joining the Three Timers Club on the Loud Majority Live. It's a prestigious group of people. It's only been 3 people so far to be a three-timer. Tiffany Savage, Lee Zeldin, and the CEO of Old Glory Bank, Mike Ring. Mike, how are you?
I'm good. And that's why I got a hat on today. Is I got the hat trick with you being on your show 3 times.
I gotta keep this mane in check. You know, it's
Yeah, I'm gonna send you. You don't have an Old Glory Bank cap yet?
No, I gotta get one.
All right, that's happening tonight.
For sure. So obviously, we love having you on because there's so much about the world of finance. There's so much about the world of banking. And the rules and regulations and stipulations around all of it that some people just don't understand. And I've long advocated for financial literacy in schools, in high schools, and it should be an elective that somebody could take. It never is. But explaining to people, what the Federal Reserve is, what it does, fiat currency, gold, it's very confusing for a lot of people. So I know your most recent podcast episode, you talk a lot about the Federal Reserve, why it was created, what it even does, and how it really affects your day-to-day life. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about this? Because I know there's so much more I could learn about it, and I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone always talks about the Fed printing money, and you think of a printing press running at night. Well, that actually does happen. They really do print money. So it came back in 1913. It really started in 1910. There was a secret meeting. If folks have not read The Creature from Jekyll Island, I recommend them read it. In fact, my most recent podcast, my wife and I happened to be passing through the area, and we stopped and recorded the teaser on actual Jekyll Island, not far from where that secret meeting happened. But back in 1910, Senator Aldrich and a group of 6 other bankers, and I call this big bank, the bank cartel is how people refer to it. This group of 6 bankers represented 25% of the world's wealth. Think about that in 1910, 25% of the world's wealth came together to start a central bank. But these folks were smart, and they knew America hated the term central bank. They had them in Europe. We had 2 of them in America prior to the Federal Reserve Act, and they both failed miserably. So everyone in their mind said, no more central bank. So these were smart folks that went down there and said, okay, we're not going to use the term central bank. We're going to create a Federal Reserve. And everyone's like, okay, reserve, that must mean you keep some gold and reserve behind our currency. Banks keep some reserve. And it was just a facade. There is no such thing as a real reserve behind it. It's just a word. And then the other thing they wanted to do is they didn't like the term central because America had been burned a couple times. So they said, okay, we'll have 12 regional banks, so there's not a monopoly. But really what happens now is there's 12 regional banks that represent the kingpin of the bank cartel. And the big bank cartel are the same 10 banks that existed in 1912 before the Federal Reserve Act still exist today in one form or another. And all they've done over all these years is protect the big banks, not protect you and I. So let me talk about a couple of things that the Federal Reserve does. It really does 3 functions that people know about, and it's real. One is they're authorized to print fiat. Now, when we say fiat, that's nothing but a fancy word for currency. It's the dollar bills you have. It's the coins. It's the digital reflection of your currency that you see in your bank, or you send money through a Visa or MasterCard or a check.
I got 42 of them right here. That's about
there you go.
That's all I got. So
you got plenty more in the bank at Old Glory Bank, I hear. And people say, okay, let me spend a minute on fiat. How could just something that's created out of nothing, I'll explain how that happens, has value? And there's 2 reasons why it has value. And it's actually not as bad as people think. The first reason it has value is because by law, the government tells you that you have to accept that. You've all heard the term legal tender. You actually, for all debts, private and public, have to accept our currency. Now, you can accept something else, like you could accept gold, or you could trade a car for a card. But if someone proffers you currency, you legally have to take it. And then you'd say, well, Ring, how is it fair that something the Federal Reserve prints could have value, and how have we let that happen? And this is what I always tell people. Gold only has value, respectfully to the people who love gold, because we say it has value for thousands and thousands of years. Now, you could say thousands of years, pretty long time, Kevin, that it should have value, but it's only because we've said for thousands of years it has value. But here's the other thing I will tell you. How long has Bitcoin been around? 10 years? And Bitcoin has value. Bitcoin is not backed by gold. It only has value because we say it has value. So I want to clear up the first misconception. Fiat does not have to be backed by gold to have value, as we've shown, just like Bitcoin doesn't. The problem with fiat, and the reason why we have inflation, is because Congress spends more than they make, and they have every year since 1913. So what happens is the Federal Reserve has to keep printing money to cover what the Congress spends. And I'll dive into that for a second and give you a good example. Think about a world that we live in, Kevin, where Congress has the power to spend money, and they've spent more money than every year, except maybe once under Clinton, that we make. We're up to now $36 trillion. And then Congress, in 1913, creates the Federal Reserve by law, signed by President Woodrow Wilson. And there's a good story behind that we don't have time to.
Well, I pretty much have a rule. If Woodrow Wilson was doing it,
it ain't right.
Let's do the opposite.
Would you mind if I spend 20 seconds on how he even got elected? It's like the craziest thing people don't talk about. Yeah. So who was one of the greatest presidents of the early 19th century? Of course, Theodore Roosevelt. He was a man's man. He quit. He resigned after 1908, and he basically anointed his secretary of, back then it was called, I think, War. Today it's called State. But Taft. Taft then won easily Republican the election in 1908. He served for 4 years. Teddy Roosevelt, who we love, comes back from a safari in Africa and says, at least this is what the history books tell you, I want to run again. I'm upset with the course of the country. I'm upset at my successor, Taft. I'm going to run as a third-party candidate. Think about that. In 1912, the year Woodrow Wilson was elected, Teddy Roosevelt, a very smart guy, lifelong Republican, and then I think whip, whatever it's called before that, says, I'm going to run as a third-party candidate. And the reason why he did that is because J.P. Morgan, the same guy that J.P. Morgan Chase is named after, backed his candidacy with the largest single donation in the history of presidential candidates to that point. And the reason why he did that is he wanted to split the Republican vote so that Woodrow Wilson, a hack Democrat, and by this time we had a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate. So if we got Woodrow Wilson in, the Democrats would control all three branches of government, the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so he backs Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy falls for it, gets wiped out. Woodrow Wilson comes in. So the reason why you've got to not like Woodrow Wilson for many reasons, he was a kept man by the big banks, is that he didn't really win the election. It was only because of the split Republican vote because of J.P. Morgan.
And it's so funny. It's so funny that you bring up Teddy Roosevelt. He has my favorite story to becoming president of anyone ever. So we're going to get back to the crux. I love this story, and since we're on it. So William McKinley is running for president. And all the Gilded Age leaders, the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Morgans, they got this guy who's roaming around the country talking about breaking up Standard Oil and breaking up J.P. Morgan Chase and breaking up all the banks. And they say to themselves, this guy's really gaining some traction here. What are we going to do to shut this guy up? And they come up with the idea, well, let's just make him vice president because, that job doesn't have any real power. So they make him vice president, and then 6 months into McKinley's term, he dies.
He assassinated. He didn't die. He got shot.
He gets killed.
Yeah.
And then the guy they tried
feared
to hide becomes the president, and then that leads to the Standard Oil breakup and the Sherman Antitrust Act and all the things that they were trying to steer
But you know what
against.
they didn't break up? Were the big banks.
Mm-hmm.
Those were protected. And it's the craziest thing think about this. The 10 biggest banks before 1913 still exist today. They have never been broken up. So, we should do a podcast just on Teddy Roosevelt sometime.
Oh, yeah.
He literally is one of the best presidents. And who knows where McKinley was not a bad guy either. But Teddy Roosevelt really was a great president. But why? He was corrupted, respectfully to his family. Why he was corrupted and thought that he could win as a third-party candidate. He wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't win. He did it for the money, and I just hate that. So that's how we got Woodrow Wilson. So that's how they got the Federal Reserve Act. And so Congress overspends every year, and then you think, what do you do with all this debt? People are confused sometimes. Remember, when Congress overspends, it's Treasury that sells the debt to Americans, the war bond, that started back in the early 1900s. But what people don't realize is that the Federal Reserve, who they created by statute, along with the big banks that they fund, along with Social Security Administration, buys 30% of every dollar Congress spends. And that's been consistent throughout 80 years, including when Jimmy Carter was presidency, which I love to talk about. That's why he really gave the canal away. But so the Federal Reserve, the three functions they do is they print fiat. It's not backed by gold, but it doesn't have to. The reason why we've had 3,000% inflation since 1913 in the Federal Reserve Act is not because of the Federal Reserve. It's because Congress spends more than they make and the Federal Reserve has to print money. Second thing they do is they buy our debt and buy other products and services. And the third thing they do is set interest rates. President Trump is always bashing on the Federal Reserve for interest rates like every president is. But if you think about it, Kevin, 12 people who sit on their open market committee set the interest rate for the whole country. And then you say, well, Ring, you run a bank. Why do you follow them? And it's very simple. If you're a little gas station, you follow the cost of oil of the big oil producers. The same thing as a bank. If you're a little bank in Elmore City, $200 million plus in assets, like all banks, you follow the Federal Reserve. So 12 people set our interest rates, and that's really fluctuates the economy up and down. And that's why the president, everyone gets upset at him. So that is what the Federal Reserve does. But they've been crooked.
I have long been saying, since the tariffs went into place, that the tariffs only work if they are coupled with the tax cuts that are coming in the next bill, whether they're corporate tax cuts, whether they are Social Security overtime tips, no taxes on those. Because I've said that Jerome Powell has refused to cut rates as President Trump has asked. But if we get that tax cut, I feel there is going to be such a flood of expendable capital into the economy that it's going to force Jerome Powell to cut rates by a quarter of a point or hopefully half a point in order to stave off inflation. Do you see that as a sort of secondary action that might happen following this proposed budget that's coming forward?
Yeah, I think you said it just the opposite way, meaning that he would raise rates if he's predicting price increases from the tariff, and that's one of the challenges he has.
Them because of the expendable income that's coming in from the tax cuts.
Yeah, I think he would lower them if he sees unemployment going up and heading into recession. So listen, I'm no fan of the Federal Reserve, no fan of Chairman Powell. He's certainly no fan of the freedom economy. But he and his 11 friends, 12 people who sit on this committee, are in a pickle. I think they should have already lowered interest rates. I don't think they do anything until they know the real impact of the tariff. So I think we see nothing for at least the next 4 or 5 meetings, next 4 or 5 months on the Federal Reserve. But you're right. Here we are today at 4.25 is basically the Fed funds rate. It could ease. It was 50 basis points as little as 3-4 years ago, but they had to run it up during the Biden inflation year. So that is driving a lot of people crazy. So let me share the last thing about the Federal Reserve, how they print money, because people always say this. This is what actually happens. Congress spends more money than they take in. The Federal Reserve wants to buy some of the Treasury debt. Now, remember, between them, the big banks and Social Security, they buy 30+% of it. So what they do is making money out of nothing, balance sheet out of nothing. They actually buy our Treasury bonds. And when you buy those Treasury bonds, you are putting, and then you sell them, you are actually creating money out of nothing, because that debt and people backing and buying that debt is churning dollars that really didn't otherwise exist or were never authorized. So there is no master ledger that says this year we're going to print this amount, this year we're going to print this amount. What happens is Congress spends money when they buy things, do things, that's putting money into the ecosystem, into the country. So that is how they do it. They don't have the money, so the Treasury and other people buy that debt. And so every year our money supply goes up by about 30% because the Federal Reserve has to step in and buy Treasury debt that Congress overspends in. So I always tell people, beat on the Federal Reserve. Two things can be true at the same time. They protect the big banks, and I'll give you 2 examples if you have time, how they protect the big banks, not us. But it's really, respectfully, Congress needs to quit for the first time since 1904 or whatever, quit spending money, or at least scaling back more than they take in. So that's how you actually print money. Congress spends it. It doesn't exist. The Federal Reserve buys the debt, and that creates the velocity of money.
Once again, guys, we are with Mike Ring, the CEO of Old Glory Bank. We are going to get back to the Federal Reserve in just 1 second, how they print the money, what they do with the debt, and I've got some questions about the Nikkei index. Talking about our national debt, before we get to that, guys, check out Old Glory Bank.
When big banks decide who gets access to America's financial systems and who doesn't, who do you think gets left out? Middle Americans who proudly wave their pro-America values. Cancel culture in banking is corrosive. It limits your participation in a vibrant, free market economy. Fortunately, you can fight back. You now have the opportunity to invest in the bank that's investing in a fair American banking system, one based in freedom. Ownership in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank, is here. Old Glory Bank is a full-service FDIC-insured bank that's the alternative to overreaching, un-American big banks. We stand for privacy, security, and liberty. We stand for freedom, family, faith, and the flag. We stand for all the values you stand for, and for the values big banks can't stand. So help keep banking in the hands of Main Street, not Wall Street. To invest in Old Glory Bank, go to oldglorybank.com.
Guys, head on over to own.oldglorybank.com and become part owner of a bank. I know I have. You guys certainly should too. Go to own.oldglorybank.com and support the movement with people like John Rich, people like Ben Carson, people like Larry Elder, now people like Sean Spicer, and of course people like Mike Ring, the CEO of Old Glory Bank. Mike, thank you so much. Federal Reserve.
It's so great that Sean has joined the team now. He's on our board. He is such a great guy, and he is such a smart guy. We are really blessed to have him involved.
Love Sean. He seems like one of the guys.
He's a real guy.
Like he's a real guy. Like I want to buy him a beer. But
Yep.
since he's on the board of directors of a bank now, I think he can buy me a beer. But so we were talking about the Federal Reserve and how they print money and what they do with that money. One thing that I really was curious about was there was rumor coming out of Japan about how much American debt they own. And if these tariffs aren't taken away, they could, quote, call in their debt on the United States. What exactly does that mean? If you want to explain that to the people, and what sort of impact would that have on the American economy if Japan, China, one of the other bigger nations out there actually called in the debt that they have on the United States?
I'm so glad you've asked about this. This is a great issue. So there's $36 trillion in debt right now that the Congress is overspending, and we've issued now, as I've said, 30% of that is owned between the Federal Reserve, the big banks, and the Social Security Administration. So 30% is basically owned by the bank cartel. The other 70% is owned by the free markets. But 1.1 trillion of that is owned by Japan. Everyone thinks that China owns most of our debt. China actually only owns 784 billion, which is not a small number, but the UK owns like 750, but Japan owns 1.1 trillion. So I actually am not I think this is a good issue. I'm not as actually worried about this as some other folks, and here's why. 1.1 trillion of 36 is a big number, but it's like 3% of our debt, right? If my math is right, 10% would be 3 trillion. Yeah. So it's about 3% of our debt. So it's not a big enough number that I think that they could really hurt it. Now, what maybe the best thing that could happen is, let's say they just said, the heck with you guys, we're going to war, we're going to flood the market and let you basically have it cheap. That would actually drive down interest rates. So it would not be the worst thing for the market if someone did just flood it, if they did do it. But I actually think it would take Japan, China, and the UK, which together has about $3 trillion of debt, 3.5%, 10%. That actually would be if they work together, but I don't think that happens.
That's good, because I mean, I'm over here going, all right, well, what would, if they just called in what they had, what sort of impact?
So they technically can't. Remember, these treasuries they buy have timed sheets. And so let's say it's a 3-year, a 5-year, or a 10-year treasury they buy. They can't call in, but they can flood the market by saying, listen, the face value of this is $100. I'm going to give it to you for $5. That would flood the market, bring down interest rates, and it could bring down all of our debt, could bring down our stock market. But I don't think 1 trillion would actually do it. Like, wasn't that long ago we had $1 trillion swings in our stock market. So I think they actually don't have as much power as people say they do.
Well, that is refreshing, because honestly, I'm over here thinking, I'm like, all right, so we're just going to add whatever they have to the top of the national debt, and then what's that going to do to inflation? What's that going to do to the markets? I mean, do I really? Well, firstly, Japan, let's not get into another tiff, okay? Because we all know what happened last time he's tried that.
Last time they took a shot, right?
Let's see, you want to go for a little sail across the ocean. We all know how that ends. But,
but let's actually, you brought up a good point. Let's take it one step further. Let's say that so today, those 3 big countries, China, Japan, and the UK, hold 10% of our debt. Let's say going forward, they say, well, they can't force us to take it back. Let's say going forward, we ain't buying anymore. The heck with you guys. This is what actually would happen. It would have the opposite effect. It would raise interest rates, because now when Treasury wants to sell more bonds to keep funding our deficit spending, if people aren't buying it, they're going to have to charge more. They're going to have to pay more and more interest rates to convince people to buy it. So the way they would actually hurt us is not by, I don't think, flooding what they have, stopping buying future, which would cause Treasury to raise interest rates to convince people to buy it, and that would hurt the economy. So them stopping buying future is almost as bad as some other things they could do.
Absolutely. So, obviously, let's talk a little bit about Old Glory Bank, proud sponsor of the show. I love what you guys are doing over there, trying to break up the banking cartel. A lot of people have been asking me, Kevin, I live on Long Island. There are no Old Glory banks here. And what I try to tell them is that you don't need a physical location where you live particularly. There's over 40,000 free ATMs all over the country where you can do all of your online banking. Your mobile app stuff is absolutely phenomenal.
Your bank is always in your pocket because it's on your phone, right?
Absolutely. And you guys offer pretty much everything that a normal bank would, or that a bank you've heard of would. Small business loans, car loans, mortgage loans, all CDs, every savings and checking accounts and everything like that. And you guys have seen exponential growth over the course of the last several years. You guys have added over 2,600 small business accounts with Old Glory Bank since October of 2023. Why do you think, and this seems like a bit of a softball answer question, but why do you think people are doing what they can to ditch the banks, to ditch, I mean, look, I have a Chase account. It's down the street. Most people do, But why do you think people are looking for that alternative option?
Yeah, thank you for that. And let me just clarify a couple of things you said. So it hasn't been several years. It's been exactly 2. April of 2023, we turned the lights on and started opening online accounts. And our little bank we bought that had $10 million in deposits is now 197. So call it 200. So I think we're safe to say that we're probably the fastest growing bank ever. And then small business we turned down about 19 months ago. And as you've said, we've signed up. We are the bank for small business. And there's a couple of reasons why. Most community banks for small business bank don't have the technology you need to really run your business, do your treasury management, send your wires, have positive pay to protect against check fraud and ACH fraud, to have a great high-end relationship team. We've invested to do that. And so we really are the digital bank for middle America, for small and mid-sized companies. And on the consumer side, it's exactly what you said. We have all the products that Chase has, and I would submit to you a couple better. And we actually love our customers and do right by our money. Like, we're not funding, transgender medical centers. We're not having ESG scores. There's no DEI at Old Glory Bank, as I've always said. You've heard me say it's just PSL. And so our consumer, grown from 10 to 200. And the reason why is because people like you. But one thing I always want to remind people is, in today's world, you don't need a branch down the street for any reason, including depositing cash. And you and I have joked about this, and you've used our Old Glory cashier, and you can walk into any Dollar General, Walmart, CVS. Our truckers walk into Loves or Pilot. 88,000 locations. Walk in, flash a one-time use barcode, give the cashier the money, and it's in your account in 7 seconds, and you can pick up, a stick of gum and a six-pack on the way out. It is middle America. It's what I do. It's what we do. And so you don't need a branch. So Big Bad Chase, where you still bank, has 5,000 branches to deposit cash. We have 88,000 locations to deposit cash in 2 years.
It is absolutely, it's absolutely great to see what you guys have done. And of course, our friend Tiffany Savage, she was telling me, I got to be honest, I am not a big NASCAR guy. I live here in the Northeast. We don't really have NASCAR here. We play lacrosse. We're the only place that plays lacrosse, really. But you guys have got a NASCAR driver. That
we have a driver, not yet a car. So Ryan Roulette, who is cut from our cloth, he doesn't really lead with this, but I'm going to. And if he gets upset, I can handle him. He is an active duty Air Force jet pilot. Think about that. A guy who flies supersonic is also, why would he not be? He's a world-class race car driver. So on the weekends, the Air Force has given him permission to do this. So when he's not flying jets, he has a car. I think it's the number 67 car. He was just at Talladega. We were there. And so we sponsor him. We do some things together. I am hoping with continued success, we can step up and actually have our logo on the car and be really one of the cool kids. But today we sponsor Ryan. We support him. And he is just a great American. Think about that. Serving your country and driving race cars. Like, would you not want to be as cool as him?
I don't know how, okay, so you fly a jet and you drive a NASCAR. How do you ever sit in traffic? It's got to be all we have is traffic here in New York. I can't imagine, you're either going a couple 100 miles an hour or you're going 500 miles, or you're going Mach 2, and then you're sitting in traffic on the George Washington Bridge and you're going 2 miles an hour. I don't know. It's the extremes. I could never do either one of those.
He's the greatest guy, and I haven't done this yet, but I'm dying to get with him. And he's probably our age. He's in I think he's definitely younger than me. I'm older than you. I think he's in his 40s, and I'm looking forward to going and have a beer. Then you imagine just hanging out with him. He's a guy's guy, sitting up, someone coming up and just making small talk. And I say, I'm a boring lawyer, a boring banker. And he says, I fly jets and drive NASCAR. I mean, it's just the coolest thing ever.
That's wild. I think it's like everyone says, everybody thinks they're a tough guy until a tough guy walks in. Everybody thinks they're cool until a race car driver and a jet and a Air Force pilot walks in the room. Suddenly, I'm a lot lamer than I thought. Suddenly, I really got to step my game up here. I don't know.
Hey, do we have 3 minutes so I can say two
Absolutely.
really things that are I think confrontational to a lot of people's views, but I love saying it. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm a normal guy. But I just love giving these 2 examples because it's in the news again. I know you a little bit younger than I, but I grew up in the 70s, and it was always weird to me that Jimmy Carter, really out of the blue almost, although some say Nixon started the conversation, Jimmy Carter out of the blue gave away the Panama Canal. And there is a reason why that now that I've done some research on this and the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, kind of talked about it, and I went a little bit deeper. I believe that the real reason, and so do a lot of people, not conspiracy theory, but a lot of people think that the reason why America gave Panama the canal was because of the big bank cartel led by the Federal Reserve. And here's why. In 1976, our national debt was 600 trillion. Today it's 36. I mean, it was 600 billion. Today it's 36 trillion. So it was 600 billion. Just like today, the Federal Reserve and the big bank cartel held 30% of it. So every year they have been bailing out Congress with overspending. Leading up into 76, 77, the big banks, Bank of America, Citi, and I forget the third one, I think Citizens, made billions and billions of dollars of debt to Panama, and Panama was about to default on them. And so I just looked at my notes, Chase, Citi, and Bank of America. So many billions of dollars that no one has ever talked about how much it is. And the theory is, which I believe, is that Federal Reserve, they would have helped bail out these banks like they have in 2008, and we'll talk about it if we have time. But they went to Congress, and Jimmy Carter and the cartel said, listen, you got to help Panama make some money. How are they going to make money? Oh, I got it. Give them the canal, and now an asset that we designed, built, and our people died, building. Let's give them the canal, and then they can start charging people to pass through it like they have been, and then they can pay back their debt. That one move saved billions and billions of dollars because now today, Panama makes $5 billion annually from the canal. And the first year that we gave it to them, which was 78, 2 years after Jimmy Carter got in office, they made enough money to start servicing the debt. They restructured the debt. They've since paid it back. So anyone who says that it was some peacekeeping, we were worried about Panama and the disaster of what was going on there, it really is because of the bank cartel, in my humble view.
Well, absolutely. And as I said earlier in the conversation, when Woodrow Wilson does something, do the opposite. I would second that with, if Jimmy Carter is doing it, do the opposite. Do the opposite of, I could go on all day about how Jimmy Carter built a couple of houses and then decided that was going to be his entire legacy, despite the fact that he wrote letters for terrorists and gave away the Panama Canal and led to a recession. And, I don't need to talk about Iran, but, he built a few houses for Habitat for Humanity, and now he's, winning the Nobel Peace Prize while working for Yasser Arafat.
Amen. If you got one more minute, can I tell people why Bank of America shared your data with the government in 2020? And so as we know, January 6th occurs, and listen, reasonable minds can disagree with how severe January 6th was. I think it was just a clown show. It was a bunch of people walking around. It wasn't nearly as severe, of course, as the mainstream made. But no reasonable mind should disagree with how the big banks and government acted afterwards. And we don't need to debate that today. We all know that it was inappropriate. But people have been really perplexed as to why the big banks, the bank cartel, shared customer data with the government. Like, people could not believe it. Folks like you and I have been talking about it since 2021. It really wasn't until March of 2024 that Jim Jordan put out that report. And you and I have talked about it on your show. But it's really now clear to me why Bank of America risked 100 years of credibility and shared data. And it was Moynihan. It was his fault. But what it really has occurred to me is that Bank of America took $45 billion with a B in 2008 under the TARP program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Does anyone think that in 2021, January 10th, 11th, when the FBI and Treasury calls Bank of America and says, hey, can you send me the name of every person who used their credit card and debit card on January 6th, or bought a weapon in the prior 6 months, or stayed at a hotel, or those other things that they did, that they're not going to do it when they just took $45 billion. I am so clear on my view that the Federal Reserve is corrupt, not because they print money. It's because they're in the tank for the big banks. In 2008, The big banks took $500 billion. We lost five, and only one big bank failed, Lehman Brothers, and they deserved it. We lost 500 small banks in 2008 in the 5-year period. A mere $5 billion of the 500 would have saved every one of them, and the Federal Reserve wouldn't do it because they didn't want to protect the little banks. They didn't want to protect me and you in Main Street. They wanted to protect the big banks. So if any of you, including you, Kevin, respectfully, if you were banking with the bank cartel and your buddies at JP Morgan Chase took $25 billion in TARP money, if you are banking with any of the big banks, you are at risk, because when the government calls them and says to them, jump, what do they say? How high? And that's why, because we're Old Glory Bank obviously would never take government money, but even if we did, well, we won't. But for lots of reasons, we're never going to share your data. So you got to move your money. If you don't want to pick Old Glory Bank, that's fine. Move your money to a small, independently owned bank.
Absolutely. Mike Ring, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, head on over to oldglorybank.com. Consider opening up an account with them today.
Takes 8 minutes.
While, of course, this is not financial advice for the lawyers out there, I am a big believer in CDs and keeping your money, locking in some of these interest rates while they are up. So, once again, not financial advice because I am not allowed to give that. But if I were me and you were me and I were you, I'd, something to think about. Something to think about. Mike Ring, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. I'm going to get you a hat.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, guys, we will be right back. Alrighty, guys, love having Mike Ring on the show. Love talking finance. I wish we could do it more often. It's stuff we all talk about. We talk about the Federal Reserve, but most people don't actually know what it actually does. We just know we know we don't like it. We just know that we don't like it. Guys, it is 2 o'clock. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in. Also, guys, before we wrap up today, if you would not mind heading on over to lfatv.us. That's lfatv.us. That's your home base, your mothership, your landing pad for all things LFA TV related. Check out the LFA TV store. And while you guys are there, consider becoming a monthly donor over at LFA TV. That's the best way to support this network, this channel, and everything we've got going on. Also, if you are new to LFA TV, guys, make sure you're following the page. Hit that follow button. If you haven't made an account yet, make sure you make an account. Make sure you make an account over here so that we can keep growing. I think we hit 100 and we're almost at 105,000 followers. As always, for my local audience, I will be at the Three Village Street Festival this Saturday. Come on down. Also, this Sunday, I will be at the Bethpage Street Festival if you guys want to get involved. You guys know I'm going to keep pushing that all day and all night, all day, all night. Guys, Will Johnson is coming up next right here on this network. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in. I want to thank Mike Ring from Old Glory Bank. Guys, check them out, and I will catch you guys back live tomorrow. Until then, everybody, stay loud.